live in rural Wellston, Oklahoma, out in Lincoln County. And when you live around Route 66, it's not just something on a postcard. It's a road you cross, ride, and sometimes forget to slow down and really look at. But Wellston has one of the most unusual Route 66 stories in Oklahoma. This is not just another small town on the Mother Road. This is a town that Route 66 nearly missed. Or maybe a better way to say it is this. Wellston is a small town that had to fight to stay connected to Route 66. Today, we are going to ride into Wellston and look at the story of Route 66 Loop and the Gap, the historic Captain Creek Bridge, and the old station and murals in the area. And then we will go to the end at Wellston's newest Route 66 landmark, the giant Route 66 pushpin. It is old road, small town history, highway politics, and modern comeback story all rolled up into one ride. Most towns along Route 66 have a story about what the highway brought them. Tourists, travelers, gas stations, motels, diners, and money. But Wellston has a slightly different story. Wellston's Route 66 story is about what happened when the highway almost passed it by. In the early days, the old road came through Wellston before Route 66 was officially created in 1926. This area was tied to an older road system like the Ozark Trail. That road helped connect places like Oklahoma City, Chandler, Tulsa, and small towns in between. For a town like Wellston, that mattered. A highway was not just pavement, it was business, it was traffic, and it was people stopping for fuel, food, repairs, and supplies. If the road came through town, the town had a chance. And that is exactly the problem Wellston faced. When Route 66 started being improved and straightened, the federal government favored a shorter route that bypassed Wellston. That shorter route became known as the Gap, but the older road through the town became known as the Loop, and that is where Wellston's fight began. So what are the Loop and the Gap? Well, the short version is this. The Loop was the road that came through Wellston. The Gap was the straighter, shorter road that went south of the town. The federal highway people wanted the Gap because it was more direct. It cut out curves, it shortened the route, and made more sense from the road building standpoint. But Wellston knew what that meant. If Route 66 traffic took the Gap, then travelers would skip the town. No stopping for gas, no stopping for food, no stopping for repairs, no money spent in town, so Wellston fought back. The town pushed for the loop through Wellston to be paved too. The fight reportedly went all the way to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and Wellston won the right to have the loop paved. But here's the part that makes the story so interesting. The federal route still bypassed the town. The Gap got built anyway. And the loop through Wellston eventually became State Highway 66, later known as OK 66B. So Wellston got its paved connection, but it didn't really win the traffic war. By 1939, one source says that only about 7 cars per hour were passing through the town on the loop, while around 600 were passing on the newer alignment south of town. That is a hard number to hear when you are a small town depending on highway traffic. Imagine watching almost all the travelers go by just far enough away that they never see your storefront, your gas pump, or your cafe. That is the story of Wellston and Route 66. It was not completely forgotten, but it was definitely bypassed. Just west of town, the old loop crosses Captain Creek. And this is one of the most important Route 66 pieces still standing in Wellston. This is the Captain Creek Bridge. The bridge was built in 1933 on the loop through Wellston, right in the middle of all of the controversy over the Route 66 alignment. It is a camelback pony truss bridge. That sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple, easy to understand when you look at it. The camelback part describes the shape of the steel truss that rise and fall in the way that it looks like a little camel's back. The pony truss part meant the traffic goes between the truss, but there's no overhead bracing across the top. So when you ride or drive across it, you are passing between the two steel sides of the bridge, but the top is open. The bridge is about 225 feet long, with central truss spanning about 100 feet. To me, bridges like this are where Route 66 gets real. A lot of people think Route 66 as diners, neon signs. I like all that stuff too, but the road itself is the history. Pavement, bridges, and curbs. The places where engineers had to figure out how to get people across creeks, rivers, and rough ground with the materials and budgets they had at the time. The Captain Creek Bridge is also a good example of preservation with a practical side. The bridge was reconstructed and reopened in 2021. The old truss no longer carry the weight of the bridge, but they were cleaned and reattached to the new structure to preserve the historic Route 66 look. That's a pretty good compromise. Modern safety underneath, historical character still visible on top. And for Route 66 riders, that matters, because when you cross this bridge, you're not just crossing Captain Creek. You are crossing one of the pieces of the road that Wellston fought to keep. Now we are going to head into Wellston and look at the old station and the murals in the area. This is the kind of stop that gives the small town Route 66 its personality. The Route 66 murals are painted on the old brick buildings near 2nd Street and Birch. Nearby, there's an old gas station known as Cecil's, with the vintage pumps and Route 66 artwork. This is the kind of place where you can see how a small town kept the road history alive. It is not always about giant museums or big commercial attractions. Sometimes it is a mural, a restored pump, a sign, an old building that someone cared enough about to decorate instead of tear down. And for Wellston, that matters, because the town's Route 66 story is not about the biggest stop. It is about hanging on. The old road changed. The main traffic shifted. Travelers went around town, but Wellston is still here. And if you slow down and look around, there are still reminders of what this road meant. There is another old Route 66 connection near Wellston too. Jack Rittenhouse, who drove Route 66 and wrote a guidebook in 1946, mentioned Wellston as a small community north of the road, and noted the Pioneer Tourist Court and the gas station at the crossroads. That gives you a picture of what this area would have looked like in a post-World Route 66 days. Tourist courts, gas stations, and crossroads. Travelers trying to make it from Chicago to Los Angeles, or maybe from Oklahoma City to Tulsa. And somewhere in the middle of all of that was Wellston. Maybe not the biggest stop, maybe not the flashiest stop, but a real stop. A working stop. A place on the road. Now we're going to end with something new. This is Wellston's giant Route 66 pushpin, and I think it's the perfect place to end this story. Because if the old story of Wellston is about being bypassed, then the new landmark feels like the town is saying, nope, we are still here, stop here. The giant pushpin was unveiled in April of 2026. It stands 25 feet tall and is decorated with Oklahoma scenes, and it's lit from within at night. Roadside America describes it as a giant map-style pushpin placed on the earth, bullseye, built to mark Wellston's claim as the midpoint of Route 66 in Oklahoma. I love that idea, because what does a pushpin mean on a map? It means stop here, look here, this place matters. For a town that once watched Route 66 traffic get pulled away from it, it is a pretty strong symbol. Wellston may have been bypassed by the main flow of traffic, but it's not gone. It's still here. The old loop is still here. Captain Creek Bridge is still here. The murals and the old station are still here. And now there is a giant pushpin telling travelers, riders, and Route 66 fans to pull over and take another look. That is what makes this a comeback story. Not a flashy comeback, not a big city comeback. A small town Route 66 comeback. And honestly, that feels right for Wellston. So, that is Wellston, Oklahoma, the Route 66 town caught between the loop and the gap. The town fought to keep the road connection, the town with a 1933 bridge, roadside stop, murals, and now a giant pushpin asking people to slow down. And for me, this one's a little more personal. I live out here in rural Wellston in Lincoln County. So this is not just a road trip stop for me. This is my home turf. And sometimes the best stories are not hundreds of miles away. Sometimes they are sitting right down the street, waiting for you to ride past them 100 times before you finally stop to ask, what happened here? If you enjoy old roads, forgotten places, small town Oklahoma, and stories hiding along Route 66, make sure you like and subscribe. I'm Donald, and this is just another stop from the road. Until next time, keep the rubber to the road and the shiny side up.